Well, good morning. Welcome to Ashworth Sunday morning worship. We're so glad that you're here. As you can tell, this is not going to be a usual, normal Sunday morning. I have my partners in crime with me here on the stage. You guys, I'm Pastor Brent, and you know Pastor Ryan. This is Pastor Amy. And today, what we wanted to do is as most everybody in the world, when you're quarantined, first I do want you to know we are arm's length apart. Don't touch me, get back. We are arm's length apart, trying to maintain the physical distancing as best we can on our stage. But just like you, we've all been watching Facebook. We've all been online knowing that there are a lot of things being said, a lot of questions being asked, and to be honest, there's just a lot of misinformation going around. And we had somebody in our church that kind of actually went on social media and compiled for us a list of the 5 top questions that people were kind of asking right now. And so we wanted to use this opportunity to take this morning to address those questions. And so, this wasn't one of the questions, but, we... just so everybody knows, we're not typically together during the week anymore. Everybody's kind of officing at home. This is the first time we've all been together this week. And so it's we are taking this very seriously, and we want you to know that this is a real threat. This is something we have to be aware of, and we want you to make sure you are staying safe at home as well. But as we were discussing via video conference this week, I am about coronavirus out. How about you guys?
Yeah. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. Yeah.
I'm tired of being sad, discouraged. Oh, man.
And you know what else I'm tired of? Amy, you and I were talking a little earlier about this. My hands hurt.
Yeah.
My hands hurt from washing them all the time, and it showed us
He needs good lotion.
I do need good lotion, but I've also learned that evidently I wasn't washing my hands good enough before. So,
right now I'm feeling a little guilty because my hands are fine.
I'm
Ryan.
not going to guess why, Amy. I'm going to just slide over this a little bit more. But again, thanks for joining us today. We're going to try to run through these questions, and we're going to just kind of make this a conversation, honestly, because that's what we thought would be the best way to handle it. And the first question we want to start with is kind of a big one, kind of a tough one, a challenging one. And it's simply this. It's a two-parter. How could a loving God allow this? It was the first part. And the second one is, if he is in control, why doesn't he stop it? Yeah. And those are great theological questions that don't have simple answers. The first part of that is, how could a loving God allow this? And I think if we have a view of God that basically says everything that happens is because God made it happen exactly this way, then that's a great question. But for me, what I see in Scripture is I don't see that the way we experience the world today is the way God designed it to be. Right. What I see, and I think what all of us see, is that in the beginning there was perfection. There was this perfect and beautiful creation. But because of man's rebellion, humanity's sin, that beautiful creation was broken. And ever since, there has been sin and brokenness and damage and pain and suffering as a part of the world. And I think for me, I begin by just saying, number one, this wasn't the way God intended it to be. Right. And then the second part of that question is, if he's in control, why doesn't he stop it? And I think for the answer to that for me is very simply choice. God could have created us, humanity, to be only able to love him. But as we know, because sin entered into the world, he gave us a choice of whether to obey, of whether to love, of whether to follow him. And by giving us this choice, it opened up this Pandora's box, right? Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of this possibility that if he allowed us to choose to love him or not, it also opened up the possibility of there to be pain and suffering and challenges in the world. Right. And so, God didn't create robots that had no choice. He gives us this choice. And so that's why I believe it doesn't question God's sovereignty by something like this happening. It just highlights his love and his creation of us as humanity to have free choice in what we see.
Because choice really, or love can't exist where there isn't choice, where there isn't freedom.
Right.
At that point, the phrase I read once years ago was, "We are just moist robots," and God is just simply moving the pieces. Yeah, moist robots. God is simply moving the pieces around, and at that point, there is no love. Right. It's just God playing with the puzzle pieces how he chooses. And so that's God. Could he intervene? Does he have the power to intervene?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's Almighty God who created everything.
And one day he will.
One day he will.
And I think that's the important part about this question that we have to remember is that, number one, this isn't the way God created it, so it's not the way it's always going to be.
Right.
These moments push us towards a future and a hope of something beyond that it exists today. And we'll talk more about that in a moment.
Yeah.
But also, there's another huge part of this is that God hasn't left us alone in this to just kind of deal with it and struggle with it on our own. In fact, it's the most beautiful part of the story of God is that he himself took on human flesh and came to live among us. And we read in the New Testament that Jesus wasn't just isolated and observing what was going on around him. He absorbed the pain. He understands what it's like to go through exactly what we're going through. And when he looks at the condition of humanity, what he sees sees it through a heart of compassion.
Yeah.
The shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept as he's looking, thinking about his friends who are suffering with pain and death. That breaks the heart of God. And I think it's a good reminder is if you ever want to know what God is like, you always just go look at Jesus because he is the perfect representation of God. And so what does God think about this? This breaks the heart of God because it breaks the heart of Jesus, and this is the compassion of God that he has for us. So I think those are just, some amazing things that we have to remember. It's not a God that's angry with us or mad at us. In fact, that kind of gets us to the second question, right? That you're going to address. So I guess the second question that we got was, is this God's judgment on us, or better yet, phrase it in the way you would like it, is this the 11th plague of the Old Testament?
The Old Testament plagues. When we got that question, I was like, yes, they're a plague question. When you look at plagues in the Old Testament, we see them, and we see God's hand actively putting plagues on people. The first of which are the 10 plagues that God sent on Egypt when he wanted to pull his people, the Israelites, out of Egypt and allow them to go into the promised land. And so there is a very specific reason, a very specific purpose to move Pharaoh's heart so that the Israelites would be able to be freed from the Egyptians and could follow his plan that Abraham's seed, his people, would be in the promised land that he promised to Abraham.
Now hold on a second. So it sounds like what you're trying to do is bring context
to
understand
to the plagues. As opposed to just God sends plagues, therefore this is one of them.
It's not just God sends judgment when he's angry. There's a reason and a very specific moment in time.
And we see these reasons. Okay. And the next plague is Moses is up on top of Mount Sinai receiving the 10 Commandments. He hears a party down below. He goes down and sees that the people have made a Baal, a god to worship out of gold. And at that point, God sends another plague. Then in the book of Numbers, which is the 40 years that the people are wandering in the wilderness, 3 more times God sends a plague to the Israelites. And it's each time because of their specific sin. They were grumbling about the manna, so God said, I'm going to give you so much meat, you're not going to want to look at it ever again. And then he still gives them a plague. And they're grumbling about Moses and Aaron as their leaders, and God gives them a plague again. The third time in Numbers 25, they were starting to intersperse with the ladies of the land around them, the Moabites. And as a result, their hearts were drawn away from God and towards the gods of these women. And just as God said would be the case, again, he sent a plague. So once in Exodus, 3 times in Numbers, God sends plagues specifically because of the people's sin.
Let me ask you this, Ryan. So I'm going to interrupt you here.
Yeah.
As you're going to see, this is a very free-flowing conversation. So why can't someone today just use that same reasoning and going, well, you know what? In America, we took prayer out of schools.
Yep.
And so the coronavirus was going to happen because we took prayer out of school. I mean that's typically the Christian argument, right?
Yeah, and Christians love to do that. They look at these verses in the Old Testament, that's a key, Old Testament, and they say, that's what we need to be doing. We need to be giving our 10% tithe to the temple, and we need to be praying, and we need to be doing this. And they take whatever rules or laws that they like from the Old Testament, and they bring it into our days today, the plague being one of them, and they forget that these are the ways God interacted with people in the Old Testament, but we today live in the New Testament. And there is a chasm of difference between how God interacted with people before he ever gave them his Holy Spirit and how he interacts with us today. Well, we have the Holy Spirit inside of us. We live on the side of the cross that Jesus has paid the price
Yay.
for every
I've been waiting for him
single
to get to Jesus.
sin. Right. And so God's
Jesus.
these plagues
Changed
were the
everything.
consequence for sin. They were the penalty for the sin. But as of today, any sin I have committed previously in my life, right now, thinking about your answers on this stage, or a sin in the future,
That's right.
all of it has already been paid for. So
Yes.
there is nothing that God can
Yes.
smite me for in saying, Ryan, you sinned and now I'm bringing judgment on you for it. And so this plague is your penalty for this sin in your life. That can't happen.
There's a word here that I think needs to be brought up, and you used Old Testament, New Testament.
Right.
But really the word is covenant.
Covenant.
Right, covenant. Because in the Old Testament, the way God interacted with the people then was governed by the old covenant, the covenant
Right.
that God had made with Abraham.
Do good and I will do
and I'll
good things
reward
for you.
Exactly.
Do bad and there are curses
But
on
when
you.
we cross into the New Testament and when Jesus comes onto the scene, the old covenant is done away with.
This blood is the new covenant in my blood.
So we can't continue to go back to the old, try to live on. Paul told us we're idiots if we want to go back and live under the old covenant because we can't live under the old covenant.
Right.
Thank God.
The reason it existed was to show us that we could never measure up.
Right.
But praise God, there's a new covenant
Yeah.
that's covered by the blood of Jesus. And so I think we've got to move on beyond
Yeah.
that mentality,
And
that old covenant.
To be fair, there's all sorts of bad theology all over Christian circles in America and around the world by not understanding the difference between these covenants. It has seeped into the way that we understand this plague, and this is one understanding. And because some Christians believe that this is the way it is, then they would say, well, as a Christian, I have had my sins paid for by Jesus, and as a result, this plague shouldn't affect me, correct?
Well, and that's another question,
Yeah.
right, Amy? Is that so? That third question that we got came in is: shouldn't our faith protect us? Shouldn't Christians be immune to this?
Right.
What do you think about that, Amy?
Short answer is no.
All right, next question.
Yeah, next question. Moving on. Because of Jesus. But the short answer is no. But the longer piece of this is that if you've been coming to Ashworth at all, you know we try to reiterate regularly that we don't believe in what you hear called the health and wealth gospel, or this idea that if you follow Jesus and if you have enough faith in him, that it guarantees that you will be healthy and that you will be rich, right? And that you don't have needs and you won't suffer, and that having faith in God, if we have enough faith, we're protected and we're healthy and we're wealthy folks. Okay, I know that's not true, right? And many of you are amening right now. You know that's not true. And so in this same circumstance with COVID-19, you are not protected from COVID-19 simply because you have enough faith. And there has been a lot of talk about having faith over fear. And that's a good thing. It's okay to say, no, I want to pray that God would change my heart and give me peace and give me just rest in my mind, that I'm not worrying about this. But God does not protect you totally from this because you are a follower of Jesus.
But doesn't some of this kind of come back to a works-based salvation, that my immunity to what's happening in the world is determined by the amount of faith that I have. And therefore, if I get sick or somebody close to me gets sick, it's, well, I didn't have enough faith. And so it really puts salvation back into this works-based model that depends on me and my effort. But we know that's not the way it is.
We know that's not true. That Jesus died for our internal sin, right? But we still experience and we still feel the effects of the world. Brent was talking about the brokenness of the world. As followers of Jesus, we still experience the brokenness of the world. We just know the end of the story. We know that God is victorious. In John 16, it talks about, Jesus says, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart because I've overcome the world. And that's a scripture that I have referenced this week in my own brain, in my own heart, to experience peace again. That yes, we're going to experience trouble. Some people in our own community, in our congregation, might experience COVID-19 in their bodies. But God is still good. And so what we believe as followers of Jesus at Ashworth is that, yes, you're not immune to this, but we do know the truth that God has overcome the world. Take heart, I've overcome the world. And so we can rest in the fact that God is still good, that God is still fighting on our behalf, and that at the end of the day, God is victorious. And so should you be following the guidelines of the CDC? Yes.
Absolutely.
Should you be wise? Yes. But you can also know there is something that we do get to have as followers of Jesus, which is we have promises to hang on to and truth to hold on to, that in the midst of all this, God can give us peace and rest in the midst of it for our brains. And just like Brent said, he can give us, he's with us. He's a God who's with us. He's not distant in the midst of this. So when people do begin getting sick, God is with them. God loves them. And he, if anything, actually, as followers of Jesus, what we see in Scripture and what we see through Jesus is that he invites us into suffering.
Hold on, that's not something that's very popular.
That's crazy, Amy.
Don't go there, Amy.
No, if you're a Christian, nothing bad will ever happen to you.
That's right. That's
a fantastic point, because I think when it comes to following Jesus, so many times we want to take all the obstacles out of the way. And when we talk to people about faith, we do paint it in this unicorns and rainbows kind of thing. Oh, it's wonderful, it's great. But no, Jesus did say followers of his are going to suffer. It's just part of being a disciple, and we forget that so often.
It's not perfect protection from every ailment.
Right.
And so as you're talking, here's something as you're saying, this came to mind. If you are struggling right now with fear, okay. If you have anxiety, okay. That doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you less than a Christian. It doesn't mean Jesus doesn't love you. It means that you're human, and as long as we live in this broken system, we're going to continue to struggle with these things. But it does mean that there is somewhere we can go to lay down those anxieties, or at least find help and support for those. And that begins in Jesus, but not just in Jesus alone, but it's in Jesus and the community of Jesus. And so it's one another that we share those anxieties and we care for one another. But we do have to move on beyond this idea that, well, if you follow Jesus, everything in your life is just going to be roses and buttercups and you'll drive fancy cars. And
if only.
Life will be good. No. And so, as Amy said, nobody wants to think about this. But some of us, some of you, some in our congregation are going to come down with COVID-19. It's very likely. Some may die because of that. And we need to be prepared for that. That if it happens, that it doesn't shake our faith. That it doesn't mean God's not on his throne. It doesn't mean he doesn't love us. It just means that we are still part of this broken world. And this is what it means to follow Jesus. That even through the valley of the shadow of death, he is still with us.
Yes.
He will comfort us. And that we will get through this because we have the Spirit and Jesus Christ and God the Father right here with us as we go through. So it's a great question I think people struggle with, and a great answer too. You know, as we deal with this though, One of the things I think, Ryan, that we've seen a lot on the internet too is not just the plagues, but also people talking about, oh, but what about the locust infestation in Africa? And we see that there's floods and there's earthquakes. So then we turn to the Bible and we go, oh, but look in this passage in Matthew where it says there's going to be earthquakes
Jesus tells us
in diverse places, and that it's going to seem like
wars and rumors of wars and pestilence.
So what people are now wondering is, so does this mean that the end is near?
Right, because Jesus does speak to it. We see it in the book of Revelation that there will be plagues that are released on the earth. But the one thing we have to understand is this is not the first time that we've had a pandemic on the earth. We have had the swine flu all over the earth that took 200,000 lives. We've had the Spanish flu. We've had the bubonic plague that took out 60% of Europe, died. And in every one of these situations, people looked at these verses and asked this exact same question. Is this the end of the earth? Every war, World War I, World War II, is this the end of the earth? Every earthquake, Jesus lays out a lot of things that happen, and to this point, none of them have marked the absolute end of the earth. And so I don't think that it's any different for us to look at this and go, is it possible? Sure.
Well, the reality is we're closer to the end today than we were
yesterday. Every single day we are closer to the end.
Deep.
And Jesus says,
you guys are so smart.
John talks about it.
Theological education gets you right
we
there.
are living in the last days. And the last days have been ever since Jesus' ascension. All of that language is true. But does it mean that this is the sign that in the next 5 years it's coming to an end and being wrapped up? People have been thinking that over every single major world event for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
For me, though, the point is, does it matter?
Would you live differently?
Would you live differently? Does it change the mandate that we have as followers of Jesus? It doesn't. So what? Are you going to go stockpile more toilet paper? You can't. It's not there. It's not in the store.
My pantry's full.
Don't do that.
JK.
But that is the reality, though. It really doesn't change how we as Christ followers. So the world ends tomorrow. That means we should work harder. If we really believe the end is near, it should motivate us. But as you said, even Paul and the apostles that followed Jesus, they thought they were the last generation. They thought that it was going to be done with them. And so has every generation since.
And they encourage us to live as people who believe the end is near.
Absolutely.
This should not scare us. It should not make us fearful of God. It should simply make us be people who live the way that Jesus taught us to live. People of love and generosity, and people of hope who are willing to serve those all around us. But definitely, if you know people that are very fearful or are looking in the news constantly right now and going, see, Jesus is coming anytime now, I'd take that a little bit with a grain of salt, because people have been saying that for a very long time, and so far, every single person who said that has been wrong. Every single person.
And if you are one of those people that open the newspaper next to your Bible to do that, we have 2 words for you. Stop it. Stop it.
Stop it.
Not helpful.
That's funny. Hopefully nobody's out there watching.
But you know what? It is a reminder. The end is going to come at some point. But as followers of Jesus, we don't have to live with fear.
Correct.
We live with hope about what is to come. And we'll talk more about that in a second, where we get to this place on the other side where there is no COVID-19, there's no pain, there's no suffering. And that's what that should encourage and motivate us in how we live, but also encourage in how we interact with others around us. So there's one more question that we want to answer this morning. And Amy, I'll toss this one to you. And so the question is, how then, with all that's going on in the world, with all the fear and the anxiety and everything else, with the fact that we as a church have to meet online and hope that we have everybody joining us, and you can click on this chat window over here this morning and comment and interact with other people if you want to. But how does that change how we as Christians are living, and specifically, how does it change how we should be praying?
Yeah, I thought about this question today, and the first thought I had was, this is a great time to actually really begin conversation with Jesus. If you don't do that often, if you don't find yourself in a place of prayer often, this is a really good time to do that. You're at home, you have space in your life, you probably have some anxiety.
If you have 7 kids at home, you need to create space because you need a conversation with
Yeah,
Jesus,
exactly.
just so you know.
I'm like, you might not be able to hear him over the screaming, but yeah, take a longer shower. Talk to him in the shower. But there are ways that I think we can be praying. I think even before I jump into that, I think the first thing I want to say is in conversation, as you begin conversation with Jesus, it's okay, like Brent said, to share where you're scared, to share where you're anxious, to pray for your own heart. One of the things that I've been noticing this week as I've talked with a number of you over text message, over phone calls, over FaceTime, is that many of you, and myself included, are sad. We're grieving something, right? We're grieving the loss of being able to be together. I know somebody who's grieving the loss of like having a normal wedding, and having to rearrange everything, and that like celebratory moment in their life, or graduations, or major life events that are changed completely. There's a lot of grief that comes with this season of life, with all those losses. And so I would say first, in prayer and in conversation with Jesus, it's okay to grieve those things.
I heard a different word used this week. Lament.
Yeah. Lament. Yeah.
We've lost the ability as believers in Jesus to lament.
Yeah.
This is really a season to lament a little bit.
Yes. And even today, just a little bit ago in the office, I just sat at my computer and cried. I'm like, the way I respond differently to things than the two of these men do sometimes. But I felt that like lament come over me, of just the weight of realizing the season that we're in and what's coming, and just hearing stories of people experiencing COVID-19 and the death and all those things, and it's a lot. So I would say the first thing in prayer with Jesus is address some of your grief and listen to other people's grief too, and pray for them, and share some of those things with each other. And then I think there's a lot of things that we can be praying for now. Like first and foremost, praying for God to move. Like we said, He didn't cause this. This isn't another plague, but we do believe that God listens to His people. Cry out and ask Him in whatever way. We don't fully understand the mystery of it, but ask Him, would He stop? Would He have mercy, and that this plague would stop? Not a plague. Not a plague. It's the coronavirus. Uh-oh.
Pandemic.
Pandemic. Thank you. That the pandemic would stop. In Jesus' name, and that it would slow. Pray for that curve, as they're talking about. Pray for that curve to flatten. And pray for those who are sick all over the world, not just the folks you know in your community, but pray for those folks, and pray for the world. Pray for those who are sick, and who are desperate, who are on ventilators, and who need healing and life in their bodies. Pray for vulnerable people in your community. I think about the older folks in your community, the people who have pre-existing conditions and are immunocompromised, and also thinking about one of the things that we've been talking about a lot as we've seen each other via Zoom this week is, what about people who don't have what they need right now, who don't have food, who don't have the medication they need, who rely on school and teachers to look out for them? So pray for those people who are most vulnerable during this time, that God would meet their needs, and that God would give ideas to people like us and other leaders in our community of how to bless and minister and serve those people. Pray for people, again, we have these folks in our church. Pray for people who are working on the front lines, who are nurses and doctors and the health professionals. These folks need to be carried by our prayers, and for their safety too. And I think I saw an image this morning on Facebook, and again, you might not appreciate it the way I did, but it struck me, this emotional, the feeler part of me. But I saw this image, and it was of Jesus, and He was holding the world, but it was a person. It was like this personified world. And it was just this tender image of like, oh, our whole world right now needs the love and mercy of Jesus, and His healing, and just His comfort, and knowing that our Savior is with us and loves us. So be praying for the whole world. We often pray for, I find myself praying for my neighborhood and for our neighborhood and my family, but we should be praying for the world also, because we know that God loves the world, and that this epidemic is breaking His heart.
And something else you can do, this will be good for your mental health, but also in a way to pray, is get out of the house when the weather's warm, walk around your neighborhood and do a prayer walk. Pray for every house as you walk by. Pray for the opportunity to have socially distant conversations with people as you come across them. But use this time that you are quarantined or isolated in your house and unable to really get out, to don't let that narrow your focus and your vision. Allow this as an opportunity to expand your vision into the bigger world that we can really share Jesus with. I want to wrap things up here, and just as we close, those were kind of the main questions. The other question was, how should we respond overall? This is a weird time. We keep saying it. You hear it a million times. It's just weird. At lunch this week, I was talking to one of my kids, and I looked at Liz and I said, "You realize you're always going to remember this. This is a once in a lifetime moment." She goes, "You think so?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I have never experienced anything like this in my life. Those that are older may remember things similar, close to this or similar to this, but this is a life-changing moment." And what I want you to understand from the staff and the leadership of the church is that I want you to first off understand, take this seriously. This is real.
Yep.
I know that if you are red or blue politically, stop listening to those people. Listen to the health professionals, listen to the CDC. This is a real thing. And protect yourselves.
Yep.
That's why we're not crazy like some people and saying, "Oh, we're going to fight this thing and meet anyway." No. Realistically, it is probably going to be at least another 6 weeks at best before we can come back together and meet in this room for worship again. And that's at best. It could be longer. And on top of that, what that probably means is that the way we do church, well, at least for the next 6 weeks, is going to have to be incredibly different. And we're trying to figure those things out and pivot and put things in place and make sure. But then we have to ask at the moment when we're able to come back, should everything come back the way it was? And I don't know that it can. I think this is going to radically reorient the church and the way we do church, and that's not a bad thing. I think it's going to radically reorient us in a very positive way to really strip away the things that don't matter as much and really focus on the things that do. But as I wrap this up, here's just the final thought I want to leave you with, is just simply this. Just remember, even though God didn't cause this, it doesn't mean that God can't use this. Romans 8:28, it says all things. God can use all things and bring good out of all things. And this is where the moment where I think to myself, well, how can he do that? I don't know. I'm not God. Aren't you glad? Amen.
Amen.
But God is God, and he's bigger than us, and he doesn't think like we do. He's not confined like we are. And in his economy, he can make something incredible out of this when we get through it. And so we live as people that know we have a God who is good. He can use this for our benefit. And as we said earlier, we live as people of the future as well as the present. And we look forward and hope for a day that is to come. We read about in the New Testament where Jesus talks all the time about the kingdom, and it's that tension that exists in the kingdom of the now and the not yet, what is and what is to come. And I hope that all of us, as we think about these questions and interacting in our own families and how things are going, that we remember we live in that tension of now, yes, we follow Jesus and Jesus is here and he loves us and he's caring for us, but we also live in the not yet of that day that's to come, where there is hope, where there's no pain and no coronavirus, no COVID-19.
Yes, Jesus.
And the healing has come. And that's also, as followers of Jesus, that's where we live as well. And so I hope today has been an encouragement to you. And I hope that you continue to search for and find ways, new ways to follow Jesus during this time.